Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're going to do a little bit of a discussion, as the thumbnail should have indicated, about tiny hoops. We've probably seen the last or one of the last major ones released in the Tiny Hawk 2 from Emacs. So I get a lot of questions, as you might expect, of this versus that. That's what this video is kind of for, is to kind of answer those questions for those people that have seen the videos but maybe still aren't sure for whatever reason of what they should want. I should position this properly. This is from my perspective. I don't necessarily know what's right for everyone who's out there, so I'm going to try to break it down into other things as well, not just what I want, but primarily it's really going to be what I want. And I also want to say thank you to Ken for the hat. It feels a little egotistical wearing a hat like this, but I appreciate it and I wanted to show it on the channel. Let's get down to the desk and start to talk about some of these. So what I've got out here isn't all of the whoops we've seen in the last year. They're kind of the most recent releases that we've seen from most of the major companies. Some of them don't even really apply. You might not recognize them. Like this is the Beta 75 Pro 2. This is the Beta 85 Pro 2. We've got the Beta FPV Meteor 65 SE edition. Essentially this one and this one, there's not much difference outside of the motor KV. So I'm not going to talk a lot about them, and kind of when I talk about them, I'm going to be talking about them, both of them, not just one of them. So there shouldn't be any questions about this or that. It's just KV difference. If you want longer flight time, get the SE if you can. I think it was limited, but I'll have one in the giveaway here relatively soon. If you want more speed, then you go with the standard Meteor 65 for that higher KV and more speed. Of course, we got the Tiny Hawk 2, we've got the Mobula 6, we've got the BeeBrain Brushless, and there was also the Tiny Hawk S, which I did give away in a video here not that long ago. That should also be a part of that discussion, so I'll probably reference it here a little bit. But first and foremost, when people ask me about best, I'm a very literal person, so that is difficult for me to answer, because I understand that what's best for me might not be best for you, because it's very subjective. But as I said in the intro, I'm going to talk about these things primarily from my perspective. And I think to start this off, it's real easy. For me, what's best is the Mobula 6. And I think if you watch the video, that is fairly easy to discern. It's the fastest, it's the lightest, it handles really, really well. It's very, very stable. I was able to fly it at extreme speeds on 1S. It really competes heavily with 2S. In my house, outside, not so much, just because of the weight and the size of prop. Typically on 2S versions of this, you're running a bigger prop, the 40mm versus the 31mm prop. Also, some people ask me about the props. I prefer to have more blades for grips in the turns, 3 at a minimum. By blades, you tend to lose more and more grip the fewer blades you have. So if you like to fly fast and you have a lot of turns in your whatever course, more blades is probably going to be the way you want to go, but you lose efficiency in that. You might be asking about these two because there haven't been review videos out, and I could post review videos and I'll give away a fair bit of details. This one I don't think really deserves a video. I bought one of these just because I was curious to see if there was any differences outside of the motor KV. There's really no difference outside of motor KV. So whether you have the Meteor 65 or this one, as I said previously, there's only a KV difference. The BeeBrain Brushless is a little bit of a different one. This is from Newbie Drone, if you're not familiar. I believe they're out in California. I've flown this enough to where I could do a review on it, and if that's requested, I can put that together. And the big difference, this one versus some of the others, is it does have the VTX built into the board, but the receiver is not built into the board. I also don't care for how this battery cage, I like the fact that the battery cage keeps the battery very close to all the other components. That gives you a little bit of an edge when it comes to the balance of the quad. But unfortunately, the USB port is used as part of the support for having the battery in there. And I don't care for that, because I don't want my USB port getting banged around, because, you know, if you come down on anything that can hit the battery is then going to be hitting the USB port, and that puts your USB port at risk. Also, this one comes in at a little over 22 grams. It might have been 23 grams, something close to there. And that brings us to the main point. When it comes to these things, power to weight ratio determines performance. So essentially, unless you have a board like the Mobula 6 board, that's an all-in-one board, flight controller, VTX, and receiver, it's going to be really hard to beat unless you can find a special motor that can produce more thrust without gaining much weight and offsetting the weight that you are above having a board like this. So that's going to be one determining factor, is an all-in-one board like this. The other determining factor is the camera. So far, this is the lightest camera I have found on the market. It is probably going to dominate the market, and as Don Johnson online indicated, could just dominate micros in general, and we might not need nano cameras anymore. The verdict's still out on that. I wouldn't go quite that far just yet, but it's not far away from it. It's pretty remarkable what they've done with this camera. And that's another reason why I think most people, as I said in the video, are going to want a Mobula 6, because either you want to fly it as it is, or you want the parts out of it. This camera did release from RunCam. I've only seen it pop up from RunCam for $19.99. So it's not a cheap camera, but I have seen cameras like this. What was it? The MCX01 or something like that was a $19 camera, which was pretty good, but wasn't nearly as good as this. And it certainly wasn't worth its price point. But this one at $19, I can get behind that. We haven't seen what this board's going to cost just yet. I would expect to pay $35 for this board, but I could be way off. That's just speculation. As I mentioned, power to weight ratio and these things are always important. So if we're comparing similar prop dimensions, then we're just primarily looking at these. I'm not talking about custom builds. That's just a topic that can really sprawl all over the place. You can talk about different motors from different manufacturers. You can talk about different props, different frames. Maybe you like the Newbie drone frame. Maybe you like some other frame from tinywhoop.com, or maybe you like the Beta FPV frames, what have you. There's a lot of discussion to be had there, but that's more for people who have a lot of experience using all these different types of components. I only bring these larger ones into the picture because we do have the Tiny Hawk 2 and S that I'll be talking about, what isn't in the video. I would say if you're looking for the best indoor and outdoor performance, in other words, those two things, indoor and outdoor, are dead even on your list for performance, then the Beta 85 Pro 2 is the way to go. This one is kind of got its fame from Mr. Shutterbug, and he was putting these kits together, I think, custom, and then he worked with Beta FPV on some of their component choices, and they came out with this. A good solution, and you probably saw my video. A lot of fun, even in the house, but I think if you have a smaller house, something like this can be flown with less camera angle, but it can get out of hand pretty quick because it does have good power. So if you want to fly indoor with something like this, then I would suggest a larger indoor space or a bigger home, maybe even bigger than mine. But if you fly in a gym, an industrial warehouse, any sort of place like that, this would be a good candidate, because then you can then take it outside and fly it fairly well. Pretty much everything with this form factor, in my opinion, doesn't fly nearly as well as anything without the prop guards on it. They just don't. There's too much wind resistance. These things, they're massively increasing wind resistance. You remove them, and some people have just cut ducts off of these things and flown them outside. There's just a huge difference in flight characteristics and performance when you don't have these on here. So if you're looking for the absolute best indoor and outdoor, this is the one I would recommend, the Beta 85 Pro 2. Not far behind it would be the Beta FPV 75 Pro 2. Of course, I have a different canopy because we know the Beta FPV canopies break all the time. I've seen a few that haven't broke. I think that's just a matter of not enough crashes. But I've got a 3D printed, and I've got that, that camera I alluded to. See how the backing's that weird kind of gold or tan color. It's a pretty good camera, but I think that was like $25 or $30. I actually made a quick video on this. It's a pretty good camera again, but it's really expensive, and it's heavier than the RunCam Nano 3. So I would say put this in anything that you choose, and you'll have a better indoor and outdoor experience alone. So this is a close contender for inside and outside, a little bit more flyable and more indoor spaces than outside. Quite honestly, with the Tiny Hawk 2, for me, as far as flight performance, it was disappointing. The flight times were shorter. I thought on 2S it just wasn't very flyable in my house, as I discussed in that video. That big lump of thrust that it's got the lower end, and yeah, you can deploy different techniques to try to overcome that or smooth that out a little bit. Some people asked me online about the rate profiles and switching the rate profiles, and maybe that was a problem with 2S. I fly the same rate profiles on 1S, 2S, 3S, and 4S. Matter of fact, I flew them on 6S as well. My rate profiles, I really don't want them changing. But when you have a motor with a huge lump of thrust, like we saw in the trash can, it becomes more difficult to be smooth. And when you're flying with a very small margin of error, smoothness is very important. But This was what people were doing with their original Tiny Hawks and Tiny Hawk S's. They were putting in better cameras. They were putting in better VTXs. So the people that wanted this form factor now have not only those features, but they have the LEDs as well. So I don't consider this a top performer by any stretch. I thought it was mediocre to average to maybe even less than that. The Meteor 65s, they fly pretty well inside, but again, they just don't come close to the Mobula 6. That's a running theme of this. If you're wanting 65 millimeter or something that you can fly indoor, I think this is the best overall candidate. It's got the best camera, it's got the lowest weight, the highest power to weight ratio. There are other things you could discuss about companies, quality control, reliability, support. There's all sorts of those different things that you could talk about when it comes to products. That's very subjective. You know, if you have one person out there that had 2 beta FPV products that worked out great, but they had one happy model product and it didn't, they're going to have a very skewed view of these things. So I'm going to leave myself out of that discussion because that's very subjective and not objective. At least I can't be objective. You know, I don't have a bunch of these that don't work and these particular ones that I showed in review videos that do. I do have I have 3 more of the boards and the cameras that came in this, and I'll be using them in other builds that we'll be seeing eventually over the winter. That will be my proof of concept for the QC on the components, the primary components that make up the Mobula 6, but that'll be coming down the road. I haven't gotten to that. That package just arrived the other day. And I think I mentioned it about the BeeBrain. The flight time is not great. It does come pre-tuned. It does come pre-configured. It's got a custom, I think it's a custom version of Beta FPV in there because you don't need a smart audio selection in Beta FPV in order to control the VTX that's built into the board. I wasn't necessarily thrilled with the video reception of that. I thought it was kind of average to below average, especially considering that I was pumping up the milliwatts on the VTX was pumping out, and I didn't see much change. I could only see it when it was on the very lowest setting compared to that, and then the next setting up. But between the next power level up, which I think is 100 milliwatts, and then 200 milliwatts, I couldn't tell hardly any difference at all, and I didn't think it was especially good. I also noticed when I set this one up that if you have USB plugged in, the VTX apparently does not work. You have to only power the VTX with battery. So if you're trying to move your OSD elements around in Betaflight while you're configuring this with a battery and USB plugged in, you just won't get any video reception in your goggles for aligning those OSD elements up. So something to take note. But the VTX is set up and it is running Betaflight 4.1. So it's something to be said. We don't have any adjustable camera angle, which is something that you see again through most of these products. Beta FPV is very guilty of releasing products that don't have camera angle, and I think that's important because not everybody wants the same camera angle. Beta FPV has kind of tried to overcome that by including 2 different mounts. That's kind of a hack on having adjustable camera angle like the Tiny Hawk 2 and the Mobula 6 do. You can adjust the camera angle. On the Mobula 6, you can't adjust it very easily, mainly because you just don't have much to grab, so you have to loosen the screws, maybe use your fingernail or a pencil or something like that to get it on the lens. Sorry, my camera keeps going out of focus here. And then put it in position and then tighten the screws back down. So that while it has camera angle, it's not really easy to use, but on the other side of that, the camera angle doesn't get lost. In other words, you have a crash and now your camera angle's changed, which I did find with the Tiny Hawk S, that when I did have some crashes that my camera angle would change. Sometimes, mainly, it would go way back. It would go like this, and I would try to fly at home basically looking at the ceiling. That's pretty difficult. But it does have camera angle, so that's something that, you know, it's another feature that you can find in a select few in this lineup. Now, if you're talking about something outside of performance when it comes to these that's where you kind of have to make your list of what is most important to me. Oh, I should mention that I would put the Tiny Hawk S, as far as performance goes indoor, kind of between these two. So let's start at the right would be number 1, number 2, and number 3. So I would put the Tiny Hawk S between 2 and 3, and those are all very, very close, especially on 2S. I think this just leads the way on 1S because of its flyability and its size. It just flies so darn well. But outside, because it's so light, and flies so well inside because it's so light, outside it's going to be very difficult, or you're going to have those 0 wind days. I don't know what parts of the country have 0 wind days. I don't think I've seen one outside of a couple that got close, and even then when you look at the weather data, it doesn't say 0 wind, it says like 4. So if you live in a place that doesn't have 0 wind, I'm sure you have all sorts of flexibility of flying these things that I just don't have, and maybe most of us don't have. I just can't say for sure. So as far as the Tiny Hawk S goes in flight performance, that's where I would put it between these. Now when it comes to feature set, that's a completely different case. You would have to put this at the top. So if feature set like 200 milliwatt and RunCam Nano 3 camera, if those things are high on your list, and maybe even LEDs, or a different design, maybe you just want something different, and this has got that pusher configuration, then you could put this at the top, because it's really the only one that's doing anything that's unique or different. Pretty much everything else is doing the same thing. They're either doing it props in or props out. That's really the only difference. This is the only one that is doing anything unique. So if you like unique design and that's number 1, then you probably put this one number 1. Maybe you put one of the other Tiny Hawks in there. Maybe the Tiny Hawk S percolates higher in your list because of its flight performance, as well as being able to do 1 and 2S. But then you're pushing the 200 milliwatt VTX and the camera down a little bit. I suspect many people who have the Tiny Hawk S are going to hold on to it and then buy this frame and then get a camera and the VTX and have themselves kind of a Tiny Hawk S2 or something like that, which would probably be a pretty good combination. But I think the flight times are going to drop pretty dramatically, and the flight performance is going to drop pretty dramatically, because when you add weight, that's what happens. This frame might also be the most durable of all the frames. I've broken these frames, but on different configurations before. I've broken this one as well. Pretty much the only frame I haven't broken, I don't think I have one out, would be this particular frame. This is the Trash Can or Mobula 7V3, I think it might be, frame. I don't think I've broken this frame. So these two frames might be the most durable frames that you might be looking at, with this one being very, very traditional and this one being unique. I should have had this one out there earlier, but I think we've seen so many of these iterations since the Mobula 7 came out and the Trash Can came out almost a year ago. I didn't think it was all that relevant to discuss it, but I guess here I am a little bit discussing it now. You may have also noticed my Mobula 6 has the BT2 connector on it, and yeah, I did transition some batteries over here to the BT2 connector, and I'll be testing that out, but honestly, I don't know if I'll have anything available before early next year, which is just around the corner. With the family and holidays, our pace is picking up of activities, flight times is decreasing, and some of you may know that I'm also looking for a different vehicle because of an unfortunate incident, so that takes up time as well. I may be able to put something together relatively quickly, and if I do, I'll get that out. We go on vacation right after Christmas, so I'm not sure how much I'm going to get out before then. But I do plan to do that. I'm sure other people, I know Nate, Mr. Shutterbug, is also probably going to be looking at this. I shouldn't say I know. I would expect him to be looking at this because he does have a lot of beta FPV products, and I'm sure he's picked up some connectors and made some batteries compatible to it, to see what he comes up with as well. And if I'm correct, the most expensive in this group is probably the BeeBrain Brushless, unfortunately. And I think that kind of puts it at the end of the lineup of viability in this market, because the cost, and it really doesn't do anything that, again, this is my opinion, it doesn't do anything that these others can't do. It's just, there's nothing all that unique about it. The frame might be special. This Goober canopy is incredibly durable, but it also adds weight. It's fairly substantial. It protects the camera pretty well, and the camera angle is locked, and it's pretty mild. So if it comes to racing, probably not. I really can't come up with a reason why someone would pick this one over these others, or even build, a build or a custom. I can't think of a reason why you would pick this. That's not a bash on the company. I'm just, from a market standpoint and from someone who likes to fly, if I had to buy this again, I wouldn't. They're just, I can't come up with a reason why I would buy this one and not either make my own custom 65mm from Mobula 6 parts, or even the Meteor 65s. You get two different camera angles, even with the canopy being a pain. And I've gotten a number of really good suggestions for firming these up. Captain tape, I think I'm saying that correctly, on the underneath inside of the canopy seems to be a suggestion that comes up fairly regularly. Some people are putting a light coating of E6000 throughout the canopy. Some people are putting E6000 just in certain places. You might also have another favorite adhesive that you like to use. You could, I think I suggested packing tape. If you didn't care about the look, just put packing tape over the top, just trying to hold those things together. So that's durability. Maybe that's what I'm looking for. If you want something that's really possibly durable, excuse me, then this might be something you would want to look for, because I do think it would be durable. Of course, parts, I believe, are distributed out of California, so if that's something else that's important to you, maybe that's a reason why. Maybe you just want to support Newbie Drone instead of the other companies, and that's why you want to buy one of these. But the performance isn't remarkable or outstanding or really all that different. I do think this is their first brushless whoop. I do like the props. I just like them better on other motors. I think just cruising around, I get about 220, and when I try to go fast, which is actually kind of hard because of lack of camera angle, I get under 2 minutes. So that's not going to make a lot of people happy, and that's what I'm kind of faced with when I review this thing. Sorry, I've kind of beat up on that one. I wish it were better, but, you know, I got to tell it like it is. Otherwise, I look like a goof. Now, if you've listened to me yammer on all the way here to the end, I'll leave you with one last nugget. Some of these have got to go away. I've got too much stuff. My boxes are starting to stack up to the ceiling behind me, so look for a giveaway video. I'm going to do that video. I think I'll probably record it over the weekend, and then I'll have it out probably right around the Christmas time. Maybe I can schedule it. So look for at least some of these. Probably not the Mobula 6. Probably not the Beta A85 Pro 2, and that's custom. Nobody wants that. But I wouldn't be surprised if you see all these in a giveaway video next week or the week after that. So if you don't get what you're looking for in your Christmas stocking, there's a possibility you can get one from the channel. So what did I get right? What did I get wrong? Where do we agree? Where do we disagree? What did I forget? What did I leave out? Leave your comments down below. And for those of you that may be looking for more information, there are a lot of really talented pilots and a lot of people with additional information. You don't need to just listen to me. Go down to that comment section and start reading through there, because there's a lot of people that I chat with in the comment section and online that know just as much, if not a lot more than I do. So there's some very valuable information in there that if you're looking to make a purchase or what parts to choose for a custom build, hit some of those people up if you see them talking about things that I may have missed or things where I'm crazy. If you do have any comments, questions, suggestions, or things to add, please let me know in that section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.